We're here tonight to listen to the poetry from the Norton Anthology of Native Nations. I want to say, Gimigwech Iwaguga Mijiang, Ugijagad, Gimigwech Iwaguga Mijiang, Iji, Imadiziang, Indigenous Cause Gay Tikanu, Gaye Gordon Henry, Anishinaabe and Dow. I want to thank my colleagues in the English department here at Michigan State and the students we all work with and for to make our work here fulfilling and inspiring. And thank all of you for joining us as well. Remember that you're in Indian country almost everywhere you go on this land. This event is sponsored by Audrey and John Leslie Endowment, the Ziibiwing Center for Anishinaabe Culture and Lifeways, the Native American Institute, and the Creative Writing Program in the MSU English Department. I will turn things over now to our moderator for this event, Kimberly Blaeser, professor in Anishinaabe homeland poetry, and she will introduce our panelists as they take their turns reading here tonight. Enjoy and have a good evening as you're listening.
Bonjour, everyone. Kim Blaeser, Indigenous Cause, Anishinaabe Kwe and Dow, Gawa Babi Boni Kog and Donjaba. I'm Kim Blaeser. I'm Anishinaabe from the White Earth Nation, and I too welcome you to this event that's celebrating when the light of the world was subdued, our songs came through. And we're really lucky to celebrate this anthology today when one of the main editor, Joy Harjo, was just named Poet Laureate for a third term. It was announced today, and her new project, Living Nation, Living Words, went live, a digital project. So this celebration continues. And I wanted to say a couple things about when the light of the world was subdued. Our songs came through, Norton Anthology of Native Nations Poetry. It has 161 poets. It represents 90 Indigenous nations. And it includes poetry that were originally songs in Indigenous languages, all the way to works by poets who had their first book published last year. So it covers an immense swath of time. It covers homelands, and it's arranged in a place-centered way. So without saying too much else, I'm going to introduce our first reader, who is Tacey Atsitty. And she is Dine. She's Sleep Rock people, born for Tango people. Her maternal grandfather is Water Edge people, and her paternal grandfather is Yucca fruit strung on an line people. Tacey earned her MFA from Cornell University. Her awards and fellowships include a Truman Capote Creative Writing Fellowship and the Philip Freund Prize. Her first poetry collection is Rain Scald. Please welcome Tacey.
Hi, thank you. I'm happy to be here tonight with you all. Thank you, Gordon, for putting this together, and to everyone who's here. I'm really excited to be here and to read with you all. I'm going to read my two poems that are here in the anthology, and I'll start with Sonnet for My Wrist. I tend to mistake your ribs for a hand towel. It hangs on a nail above the wash bowl, the hand towel, ripped. There's something wearing about the end curve of thread. When I sleep, I keep my palms open, verve. We were lovers in a field of gray. In Navajo, we say something rote. I'll radical when you hurt me something close. Even you waft. It's best I tether, forget flyaways I plucked. My bones, they lie to me like fray, like gaunt. I don't crawl back for fragments, even a spinal cord of sinew. It's not going to close. You rope me from stray to grip. It's all for naught. I'm born for my father, Tangle people. Our mouths and webs. Tonight my wrists part and you chase my insides until they dangle into pieces. Rain Scald. When standing in rain for so long, you no longer hear or feel it falling. You believe it's stopped. Step away. Look to your skin, muck itch. It's a shame your hands have gone bald from fungus, taking you to what's beneath scab, to one of those nights when you know your gums will bleed. To say it's been a while, or it has to do with wrist mange, is to say rot comes so easily now. Skin weep, lapse, step through the whole black of your home and still know damp, know exactly when to bend your finger for the light switch. So familiar in a bod. Shame. Your hands have gone haywire, taking you to what's beneath rust, ranges they've grazed, a time when you're combed through, when you know your knuckles and all that rain has swallowed. So I'm going to move to my book, Green Skull. And this is called Night Song to the Gorge Dwellers. With no fire, you offer nothing. Say, a body found, Fall Creek Gorge, eventual. It is meaning to happen, meaning to say, dear fellow. It is with deep name, strung like hair, water strands made old, made white, too close to dark. Second tragedy, Fall Creek throat. Repeated loss, thirst in almanac of the gorges, litany of wrists. Look down at your wrists, down here where the thick laps the lips, where you haven't been taught to pull yourself out of the plunge pool and look for fire, look for rings shifted to your thumb and forefinger, there like vapor wrapping you in strips. In this falling moment, cities sink into the depths, drown the earth, face carried up and away in the current of a whirlwind, where water and mountains hide in deep blue. What faces bring, a reservoir filled, following the night when day fell into day, soon followed by night into night to night, thrice with no moon, thrice with no flame, kept in the thick. Bone spur. I told myself, Bahazid. It means I told my hand to be careful because it looked harmless. Mine were palms once bruised. Now they lift like snowflakes, a flit and sunder at even. It's not that I don't want loose. Ice worms recumbent from wriggle expand and my wrist bone goes swollen with freeze. I lament how my wrist joins forearm to hand, palms turn like face. Thin tubes of empty, I lip a sucking song, one that melts the ice beads from my joints. But I can no longer abide singing male parts in addition to female vocables. I am breathless by the time I begin my own. That is to say, I don't invoke water. I am most agreeable in drought, but fear the far tingle and burn of hands. The problem is my love abides only in ice storm. The truth is my wrists lock even at the waft of flame, at the grain of hair rubbing together in a hand towel, at the smallest drizzle on my palms. So this is new work that I have the rest that I'll be reading tonight, I have a few more poems. My second manuscript, and this is called Twist Implied. I wore my neck today, a red cedar twisted, implied I was ready for any turn that come my way. And it was in the moment of driving off from the circle that I wished I were encircled with him under the honeymoon in a veil of seagull lilies and strawberries. It's the day I came tying, the day we dug arrowheads from the bottom of a tub to wrap twine about the necks of obsidian. We came around the rotary like the bark braided around my neck. It was night then, and I returned to the mountain between my feet, up my legs, into my body, nearly all alone in river. And still, like a single ripple left wanting honeysuckle mornings, I felt grass sway inside me like the strands of ribbon along his ribs. I've seen him weave his way into manhood. I know the shapes his palms make, ankles and teeth. They slide, then lock into me like rope burn, fused to each petal or wing or ripple. The night my wrist broke. They came ready for blood that night. The snow fell so gently I mistook it for female. My dad raised me better than this. 5 male EMTs peered into the darkness my truck held. Their eyes scanned every dark crease of my body. It was cold that night. My truck was a cage protecting me. Still, I could hardly exhale. I'm sorry, I'm crying. All but one looked away, allowing me to cry for a moment longer as though I were one of them. I kept my right wrist close to my chest, a pain so clear I could see every empty cavity in my rib cage. Heart thumping like a bass guitar, hand strumming to the sound of a girl wailing. A February snow. I get like this when it precipitates, fall like salt, muscles in my back tear to the point of floating, bearing flakes. They come heavy now, lacking grace, exposing the weight my collarbones carry. The wind can only lift so much with its song. Snow is a blessing. Its color amplifies silence so you can hear every crunch or offering of self. A sugar cookie wrapped in napkin, I thought I knew love in every drag of the tongue across icing. Sparkle and glaze. Thought I went wading into stars, pulling my dress up to my knees. Alas, all that's here is a field of snow and a napkin to cleanse my lips of any leftover sweetness. I ate that cookie for days until I fell brittle. It's the time of year when I sink into my armchair, into threads of branches gone bare. It's tough to tell in this scene if it's birth or dying time. All I know is it's the season when wind comes crying like a baby whose head knocks a pew during the passing of the sacrament. That silence, her long inhale filling with pain. And I'm going to finish with this poem here. Last night, bleeding. Last night, when the prophet was near done dying, I lay bleeding on my new mattress. It had been years since I had bled this way, and I had forgotten how to care for myself. But Tom's dad, too, he gave them the slip. The cells of his body went in a calm yellow way. Tom texted a photo of his father's head, bald, the way my hands were going, from rubbing out blood from beneath me and inside me from my garments, and Christ. He welcomed his chosen seer at the same time. Only yesterday did I see the feet of a stillborn on Facebook, his toes and soles and ankles already so pale and peaceful in a cloud of sheets, while the rest of us turn and turn in snow, clotting back into white cells, then a code talker, a grandfather, how handsome his life, and an American flag lies over. These mornings I take to the Rain channel on YouTube without thunder, so it feels real in season. These days, every time I lie down, I imagine cutting the skin from my navel to my neck and open up like I've never done before. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tacey. That's absolutely stunning and beautiful. And the imagery of blood bleeding that runs through that and loss, but also I feel like your poetry is just, bleeding not only loss, but hope. It's really gorgeous. Thank you so much for that. It's now my honor to introduce Gwen Westerman. Gwen is Dakota and Cherokee. She received her BA and MA at Oklahoma State University and her PhD in English from the University of Kansas. She teaches American literature and American Indian literature at Minnesota State University in Mankato, although I think she's on sabbatical and creating wonderful new poetry. She is the director of the Native American Literature Symposium, a Native American Studies conference founded in, can you believe it, 2001. She's won awards for her research on Dakota history and language. Her collections of poems include Follow the Blackbirds, which is written in Dakota and English, and that was published in 2013. Please welcome Gwen Westerman.
Gwen, you're on mute.
It's only my 7th Zoom meeting today. Hamitakiopi. Ampetukinde nina iyo makpi wana ake wachiankapi. Ka he mayu iokpi. I'll follow Tacey's lead and read the poem that's in the new anthology. We come from the stars. Stellar nucleosynthesis. That explains where everything in our universe came from, according to astrophysicists who only recently discovered the cosmological constant causing the expansion of our universe. Our creation story tells us we came from the stars to this place, Bedote, where the Minnesota and Mississippi rivers converge. Our journey along the Wanari Chanku in our universe that stargazers later called the Milky Way, now disappearing in the excessive upglow of a million urban lights. The original inhabitants of this place, of our universe, we are Wichanchpi Oyate, star people, and will remain here as long as we can see ourselves in the stars. I kind of have a theme here tonight. It revealed itself. It wasn't intentional. This is called Theory Doesn't Live Here. My grandparents never talked about theory, decolonization, or post-colonial this or that. They talked about good times and bad times. Their self-determination was not a struggle against colonialism affecting their self-imagination. They just worked hard to survive. They didn't imagine themselves through story. They knew themselves through the stories they heard as they sat under the kitchen table, listening to the old people talk when they were children. They didn't need theory to explain where they came from. They lived it and they knew it. Almost unpatriotic. I hear they outlawed ketchup on school lunches in France. It encourages children to eat too many French fries. That is almost unpatriotic. The lowly yet pervasive French fried potato and its more patriotic version, freedom fries. Same process, same potato, yet somehow a statement of dominance, dominion, pride, superiority in the simple change of a name. A French fry is a French fry is a French fry. Does it not taste as crispy by any other name? Did we change its character, attributes, composition, history, simply by changing its name? Or did we just make it easier to swallow? This is called Tonka Tonka. Neither of my parents spoke English as children. When my mom was 6 years old and my dad was 7, they were sent away to boarding schools in Oklahoma and North Dakota. It was there that their original languages faded away, replaced by someone else's mother's tongue. By the time I came along, my grandma told me that I needed to learn English and learn it well. So when I grew up, I would be successful. She didn't say anything about being a poet. It is a different environment for a Dakota poet, culturally and linguistically, than, say, for a Latina who incorporates Spanish into her poems. Her readers may be discomfited by the language shift, but Spanish is the second most spoken language in the world. Dakota is on the endangered list. So the first time I used Dakota language in a poem, I was hesitant about the response it might receive. As a language learner, who was I to be writing in Dakota? Dokagyan he ampetukinde ake unspe makia hekta ako wachianke ka chante mawashte. It was a simple poem, 5 stanzas, 20 lines. Within those 5 stanzas, the 13 Dakota words are not translated. Just 31 syllables, the usual amount for a Tonka poem, a form that originated in Japan in the 7th century. It is older than haiku. Nobles in the Japanese imperial court would compete in Tonka contests, and lovers courted each other with Tonka poems. Sounds a lot like how Dakota culture might have been in the 7th century. Today, not many people can speak or read our Dakota language. There are many learners who, much like me, dream of a time when they can carry on a conversation with the few remaining fluent grandparents in our communities, or write with confidence in our language about anything under the sun. Chanka hupajo numpa wanwe chabadake, chante washtepi, a chinch wita a kata ed iwankapi. I love my first Dakota poem now. I read it without hesitation almost everywhere I go, especially when there are second language learners in the room. It does not matter if they are learning Dakota or Japanese, Spanish, or English. What does matter is that everyone can be encouraged to use the language they know to say something meaningful, encouraged to be playful with the language, the way we were as small children first learning to talk without fear. Sometimes it begins with as few as 13 words. Sometimes it begins with a song. Makasi tomini, Dakota wichoha ki o tehike. Dama kota maishibi, mini head michie ye. Learning our Dakota language will be a lifelong journey for me, so I use it every day in every way I can, including in my poetry. It is now a part of who I am, a woman who cherishes her language, who continues to try harder to be a good human being and a good poet, and who does what she can to resist, to challenge that endangered label. In Dakota, Tonka means big. In Japanese, Tonka means short song. A sequence of 100 tonkas is called a haiku shunta. My goal is to write 100 tonkas in Dakota. There will be songs and jokes, stories and histories, love and tears, maybe even 5 or 6 tonkas about a little black dog. It will be a tonka tonka. I'm the mother of a Marine Corps veteran. I'm the daughter of a Marine Corps veteran. I'm the granddaughter of a World War II Army Air Corps veteran. So I've been focusing a lot on war mothers who are often forgotten in the daily struggles across the world where there's war. So this is called War Mother's Song on Veterans Day. On this day, we remember the costs of war borne by all, visible and invisible scars, none of which can be eased by yet another department store sale. On this day and every day, war mothers know that there are never easy answers to the question, the eternal question, why? 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 Still, we sing on this day and every day a prayer song to protect our sons and daughters until they return home to us who bore them. We hear the words of the ancient warrior poet in the Iliad who said, "We will let all this be a thing of the past, though it hurts us." War mothers know there are never easy answers, but we will keep singing our prayer song on this day and every day. And I'll end with Dakota Homecoming. I think it's got meaning, even wider meaning today in light of all of things that are happening around us. The violence, the accusations, the denial of systemic racism, and whose responsibility it is to address it. But this was written long before today's current events. So I'll end with this. Dakota Homecoming. We are so honored that you are here, they said. We know that this is your homeland, they said. The admission price is $5, they said. Here's your button for the event, they said. It means so much to us that you are here, they said. We want to write an apology letter, they said. Tell us what to say. Wopidaota.
Miigwech, Gwen, that was wonderful. I am so down for 100 tankas in Dakota. I look forward to that. Thank you for that beautiful reading. So now it's my honor to introduce Leanne Howe. Leanne Howe is Choctaw. She writes poetry, fiction, nonfiction, and screenplays, as well as scholarship. I want to throw that one in. She is the Edison Distinguished Professor at the University of Georgia. She's a United States Artist Ford Fellow, as well as the recipient of a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Native Writers Circle of the Americas. She's an American Book Award winner, an Oklahoma Book Award winner. She was a Fulbright Distinguished Scholar to Jordan. Her most recent collection of poetry is Savage Conversations. And of course, she was one of the editors of When the Light of the World Was Subdued, Our Songs Came Through. Please welcome Leanne Howe.
Oh, thank you, Kim. It's an honor to be with you all. And so I'm going to read from the book. I'm going to read one of the poems from the book, When the Light of the World Was Subdued, Our Songs Came Through. This book project took a long time, I think, in thinking and its birth process, but it came together pretty quickly over a 2 year, 2.5. All of you were part of that process and part of the book itself. So we're just very happy. I'm just very happy to be a part of this and be a part of the reading this evening. So I'm going to read from one of my poems from the Southeast. I'm from Oklahoma, and this is about a woman who is leaving our homeland in 1831. So this is called Ishki, Mother, upon leaving the Choctaw homelands in 1831. Right here is where I once suckled babies into red people. Right here, we grew 3 sisters into corn, beans, and squash. Right here, we gave goods to all who hungered. Right here, we nurtured abundance. Right here, my body was a cycle of giving until torn from our homelands by the Nahola and Andrew Jackson, the duteous seamster, intent on opening all veins. Right here, there's a hole of sorrow in my heart, a puncture, a chasm of muscle, sinew, bones. Right here, I will stitch my wounds and live on and sing and sing and sing. I am singing still. one of the core narratives, I think, from Southeastern Indians, but especially Choctaws, is that we were the first tribe to be removed out of our homelands and walked on what would become known as the Trail of Tears. And that is a conversation that when we get together and talk as Southeasterners, we always go over what happened, how many we lost, the names, repeating the names. And so that's where that poem and feeling came from. I'm going to read and finish up with the new poems I'm working on for a book called 1918. This is a book, and it's a set of poems about my grandmother. I was adopted by a big Cherokee family, and so this is my honor song to her and that big family that held me so close in Oklahoma. And so my grandmother was married in 1917, and she lived in Union Valley, Oklahoma, which is a road on the way to Tishomingo. And so this is called 1918 Union Valley, Oklahoma. 1. Maybe it was while reading the 1918 Union Valley Bulletin, a political handbill given John Hoggett by a hacking cougher at the feed store. Maybe it was the sour apple gone mahogany black that he'd eaten from his wife's cellar stash. He knew he should have given it to Trudy, their hog. Maybe it was the 6-mile walk to and from his father's farm in need any help with a heifer pop? Maybe it was the burning, tingling, running over the top of John's head, as if he were being roasted alive, filling him with fear. He coughed into his fist. No. Iva, honey, lock the gate so the Crowder boys can't steal our cow. He coughed into his fist. Iva, honey, he coughed into his fist. Iva, so cold. Winds like a siren whipped the junipers outside, maybe 90 per. He swayed left and then right and on to their Jenny Lynn bed, a wedding gift, coveralls still on. 2. Shocked into consciousness by sunlight, Iva supports herself with her arms and leans forward, eyes mucus glued. Has she been crying in her sleep? The bed is cold. The stove is out, her long black hair matted by high fevers in her dreams, the sound of a gurgling brook. She looks at John, her teeth chattering. He is completely blue now. She presses on John's chest. Blood and mucus slip from between his blue lips. Breathe, John, breathe. Don't worry, I gave our baby to your sister Yuta yesterday, the day before, maybe last week. She's safe. Didn't make a sound, just waved, bye-bye, bye-bye, mommy, bye-bye. Like you, she doesn't complain. Like you, she's more Irish than Cherokee, like me. Breathe, John. Take a breath, John Hoggett. How many times, John? Iva curls up by his side, played out. Who has never bruised a living flower, she whispers. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to take. Breathe, John. 3. The sun is yet a rumor. Iva sleeps like the dead until she doesn't. On the 3rd day, she feels herself rising. Everything a moving cloud. She observes herself in the mirror, washes her mahogany cheeks. That's odd, she thinks. Lock the gate, John, or the Crowder boys will steal our cow. She coughs into her handkerchief. John, honey. She coughs into her handkerchief. John, honey. She coughs into her handkerchief. Hear me? Yes, Iva. You live in unmeaning dreams, he says. The grave is ready. John, honey, stay. I washed your Sunday shirt, hung it on the line to dry. We can bury our faces in summer laundry. Take the scent of sun in a field of light. Breathing as one, stay. 4. Iva is dreaming again. She hears his name, John. The sound like a bell on her tongue. John, on, gone. Breathe. Thank you.
Thank you, Leanne Miigwech. That was wonderful. I love the I Am Singing Still because it goes so well with this anthology. And I want to give a shout out. I noticed in our attendees is one of the other editors, Jennifer Forster's here. So we all want to say hi. Miigwech, thanks for coming out. We're celebrating your work here too. So we have Margaret Noodin, Meg Noodin is here, and I'm here as well to read. Meg did a lot of the translation of the Anishinaabe for the anthology, and she wants to kind of support that in how we're celebrating tonight. So we're going to kind of do a duo of one of my poems, and she's going to read one of the other poems that she translated. I think that's our plan. So I think I'll introduce Meg first and let her talk a little bit about that process, anything she wants to say about the translation, and read one of the poems, and then maybe we'll come in and do our duet, the bilingual poem that she translated from English to Anishinaabe for me, and then I'll read a couple of mine, and then we'll have a Q&A. So that's kind of the plan. So I want to introduce my equate. Margaret Noodin is a professor of English and American Indian Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, where she also serves as the director of the Electoquini Institute for American Indian Education. She's the author of Bawajimo, A Dialect of Dreams in Anishinaabe Language and Literature, and also Weirini, which is a bilingual collection of poetry, and her most recent bilingual collection of poetry is the beautiful What the Chickadee Knows. So please welcome Margaret Noodin.
Miigwech and Kim, Gwen on Indigo, Objeshi, the Bandagas, Minnesota and Don Jaba, Chishaj go Piquezan, Suea, Chaska, Daya. Nonga Minoa King Daya. So just to kind of shout out to relatives and people and places that I've lived. I think it's always been a nice mix to come from Chaska, where we have the edge of Dakota country and Ojibwe country, and I spent a lot of time up north with relatives as well. So it's kind of fun to hear Gwen's words tonight. It's been great to hear everybody's words tonight, really. It's really good to hear this book come to life and hear all the ways that it moves out into the world and these voices get remembered. So I often think it's the role of the translator to bring the language from the past forward. And so I'll just take a quick second here to read one of perhaps the shorter poems in the entire volume, but one of the oldest too. The Water Birds Will Alight by Ziibiwing. We had recordings done by Frances Densmore in the Minnesota area back in the early 1900s. And these recordings were put away as sound artifacts and not always thought of as poetry. And even when they were often published in the name of those who kind of re-expressed them or retranslated them. But rarely was credit given to a Mary Warren English, who was the woman standing there helping Frances Densmore understand what they really meant. And when we dig into the story, we find that she actually did beautiful justice to what was being said, and I think revealed the way some of these songs are actually poetry. So I'll just read one. Get Endowment Sinandagok Benesiwak Akawa Ayayan. It is certain they land on me, the thunderbirds, across my existence. So it's a small piece, but I think a beautiful way to think about the poems that were there before us. Another part that I got to work on in the book was the work of Jane Johnston Schoolcraft. And when you look in the book, you see that she moved between worlds, writing in her Anishinaabe language, but also in her English language. She was very, very bilingual, raised at an early age with one parent who was a fluent English speaker and one parent who was a fluent Ojibwe speaker. Their household was very bilingual from the beginning, which is rare and different. And I think it's a story that's not often told. She studied in Dublin. She was very traveled and had many books in her house. And when she grew up to write poetry, she wrote poems in English that sounded very much like the early 1900s when she was, or the early, actually, I'm sorry, 1800s when she was writing. And then she had shorter versions that were an echo of the place that she was trying to recall. And one that I think is really poignant is the one that she wrote has a very long title, On Leaving My Children John and Jane at School in the Atlantic States and Preparing to Return to the Interior. One of those classic long titles that explains exactly what's going on. And the English version has got rhyme and it sounds very redolent of the era. But I think the Ojibwe version is so lovely and so simple and has echoes that I don't think people would remember necessarily when they think of her. So I'll read that one. I'll read it in English first so you can hear it, and then I'll read it in Ojibwe. Oh, I am thinking, I am found by you, my place of origin, a faraway place, my place of origin. My little daughter, my little son, oh, I leave them in a faraway place. Now it's near, I am alone, and as I go home, my homeland, I am alone, going home, oh, I am sad, which written on the page says one thing that is very heart-wrenching, but then we realized that she had these trailing vowels at the end of the lines, and we realized that it could very likely have been a song. So those of us that sing in the Great Lakes now, I sing with a group called the Misquassining Nugamojik. This is the way we remember that poem now. Ea ntenda me kaumen et nokian wasuwakme et nokian dan esense we sense ishenaganawa wasuwakme et nokian Jigwa go shawe, peshwawe, nishike weya, Ije Ijayan, Etnokian, Etnokian, Shikewayan, Ishekiwayan, Yangash Kenda, Etnokian. So maybe I'll leave it with that about our homeland and about waterways, because I know that Kim will pick up the story there and talk a little bit about how we remember waterways, and I'll do my part to weave the language in there.
Wonderful. Miigwech for that, Meg. We were talking about our songs came through, and there we have that beautiful, beautiful song in the language. So I really appreciate you doing that for us. I always love to hear you perform. So I have, one of the poems that I have in this anthology is one that is, and it's deals with an earth diver myth. It is about water, about all of those bodies of water. It's an invitation to go into the water. I want to show you, if I can, what it looks like on the page. Now, I don't know if I can, and then there's an image that goes with it. It's a picture poem also, but on the page it has English on the left and Anishinaabe Moan on the right, and it's going down the page in the shape of a water animal diving. And so carry that image with you. And so we're going to read this alternating. I'll read the English. We'll do stanza by stanza so you get a sense of some of the fluency of it. So, dreams of water bodies.
Nibi Wiawan Bawadanan.
Wajushk, small whiskered swimmer, you a fluid arrow crossing waterways with the simple determination of one who has dived purple deep into mythic quest.
Wajash Agashi Mimishanoet Bugazot Biwak Dakamadagayan Mashka Wendaman Gogi Wash Kwaniamban Demi Minondek Gagwediamban.
Belittled or despised as water rat on land, hero of our Anishinaabe people in animal tales, creation stories, whose tellers open slowly, magically, like within a dream, your tiny clenched fist, so all water tribes might believe.
Gigopusumagok, Nini Chihuahua Wabaganuji Akin, Ogichida Anishinaabe, Awe Sinajamoenong Adazokanak, Dash Debajmojik, Onisakananawa, Nengach, Enjimamanjiding, Godobik Wanoninj, Nidash Gakana, Nibi Shanabek, Debwe and Mawat.
See the small grains of sand. Only those poor few, but they become our turtle island, this good and well-dreamed land where we stand in this moment on the edge of so many bodies of water and watch Washushk, our brother, slip through pools and streams and lakes, this marshland earth hallowed by the memory, the telling, the hope, the dive of sleek whiskered swimmers who mark a dark path.
Wabandan Negwan, Asa Ongoeta, Majmishikaminis, Ninwabandan King Mampi, Niganagabawing, Agamegong, Wajoshk, Wabmong, Nikananonik, Jibasage, Zagaegan, Gae Zibinsan, Mashkik Shawendong, Mikwendong, Wawinendong, Ejibagasendamoat, Ejigogiwat, Agashing, Memishanoet, Begasojik, Debike Mikano.
And sometimes in our water dreams, we, pitiful land dwellers, in longing recall and singing, make spirits ready to follow. Bakobi, go down into the water.
Nan go non, Enjinabi, Bawajaganan, Gidamagozik Jik, a king in dying, Bakakanodang, Dash Nagamoying, Jibanakayang, No Sonoy Igayang, Bakobiang.
Okay, so I'll read a couple more of my poems. I have a couple more in the anthology. I think I'll read a couple newer ones and then back out with one of those. So it's November. It's that time when the world is so permeable between us and all of those people that we care about who may not be here. So I thought I would read, this is kind of a strange little poem, and I'm not going to say much else. It's called The Knife My Father Gave Me at 8. 1 inch longer than my empty ring finger, no field master multifunction wonder, a single blade case, slimline trapper, pocket knife my brother would teach me to thumb, open, closed, open, closed, open again, until I could slide it out quick and smooth, until I could point it, flick my wrist, throw and sink it every time, blade first, into the sweet summer white earth clay, respect it, wipe it clean on my jeans. The knife my father gave me at 8 whispered to me the things he left unsaid, small, sharp, and pearl-handled pretty. It does the work of any man's blade. And then I thought, I've been debating what to read, but I thought we're still in this time of needing to call attention to the inequities. Gwen mentioned this, and so I thought I'd pull out this poem that I wrote after the murder of George Floyd. And it is called Dead Letter, and I use Dead Letter because it refers both to those letters that are undeliverable. We know a lot about that now, having gone through the election and all the things about the post office, right? But it's also laws and treaties that have never been repealed, but are essentially defunct because they're not enforced. And then one other thing I should say about this, it has as the title of the second part, a line from Mon Mong. And it's called Dead Letter. Kneeling before what God on another man's neck? How we lynch now in America, a forgery of justice, protect and serve defunct as dead letter laws. George Floyd, another notch on the pearl handle of power. Tamir Rice, Breonna Taylor, Eric Garner, Dontre Hamilton, notch, notch, power notch. Spell me another word for master. Picture postcards of lynching sent. Videos of murder by police addressed to each hall of justice, undeliverable, addressee unknown. 2. And what if hope crashes through the door? Migazi burns, a riot of flames, a sorrow of suffocating bodies. I can't breathe your toxic America. Sell me windpipe dreams of cedar fluted breath, a song for continuing in our shelter, in our streets, without the phallic generals, for continuing beyond slave ships and warships and Nina Pinta and Santa Maria ships, beyond chains, treaties, internment camps, boarding schools and segregated schools, removals and reservations, the phrenology of race and race and race, how we race now, America, to new emancipation, no peace without justice. Let us mask ourselves in hope, all broken of these histories. Kneel now together and count 9 minutes to change. All right, and then since we have Gordon who's sponsoring this, and I noticed that among our attendees are some other Native American Literature Symposium people, as well as Gwen, I would do a poem that came out of that conference. So some years ago, Gordon is known for having these very simple titles, you know, small words, nothing very, you know, challenging, right? So I'm joking. So he had a conference title and it had like the subjective fixation of something. And I was supposed to talk about subjective fixation in Anishinaabe poetry. So I thought, what better way to do that than to let the poets speak for themselves. I've been working in a form that's like a santo, where you use only the language of other people to build the poem. So that's what this one is. And it's a subjective fixation cento for 2 voices. So I'll try to show, you know, to distinguish between the voices so you can hear those as well. And this is all this language comes from Traces in Blood, Bone and Stone, which is a collection of Anishinaabe poetry that I edited some time ago. A subjective fixation cento for 2 voices. Littered with the detritus of what we are under a lens, Indians are not clean. In empty territories claimed terra nullius by greedy men, they are ungodly and ignorant. The latch is the small hook and eye of religion with a bestiary for a family album. It is not what you imagine, no matter what you imagine. Pitch devils. This cage of flesh and bone needs cleaning. In this age called America, we can eat their spirits like corn. My touch is a history book full of lies and half-forgotten truths. Indians are like children. Colonial genealogies dependent upon the Queen Mother. I am the historical schizophrenia of beadwork and jewelry and lost languages. Try to forget the pagan tongue, written by others who hold the pens and the power. Think and remember what happens to girls who speak a pagan tongue. The arrest of a woman in long, dark tresses, timber niggers, whose hysterical laughter caused a public nuisance. Stray bullets. The only good Indian is a dead one. All graves are pregnant with our nearest kin. So that, and then I guess I'll close with a poem from the Norton. I wanted to do a softer poem, but I also want to make sure we have time to get to questions. And the poems in here are not terribly soft. I'm going to do like probably the oldest poem, one of my older poems, but it is a closing poem. It's a poem that has some allusion to history. And I want to read it because I want to offer it to all of my fellow readers and all of you who work for justice through poetry or through education or in whatever other way you might do that, maybe song. Apprentice to justice. The weight of ashes from burned out camps, lodges smolder in fire, animal hides wither, their mythic images shrinking, pulling in on themselves, all incinerated fragments of breath, bone, and basket rest heavy, sink deep like wintering frogs, and no dust bowl wind can lift this history of loss. Now fertilized by generations, ashes upon ashes, this old earth erupts. Medicine voices rise like mists, white buffalo memories, teeth marks on birch bark, forgotten forms tremble into wholeness. And the gray, weathered stumps, trees and treaties cut down, trampled for wealth, flat potlatch plateaus of ghost forest raked by bears, soften, rot inward, until tiny arrows of green sprout, rise erect, root fed from each crumbling center. Some will never laugh as easily, will hide knives silver as fish in their boots, hoard names as if they could be stolen as easily as land, will paper their walls with maps and broken promises, scar their flesh with this badge heavy as ashes. And this is a poem for those apprenticed from birth. In the womb of your mother nation, heartbeats sound like drums, drums like thunder, thunder like 12,000 walking, then 10,000, then 8, walking away from stolen homes, from burned out camps, from relatives fallen as they walked, then crawled, then fell. This is the woodpecker sound of an old retreat. It becomes an echo, an accounting to be reconciled. This is the sound of trees falling in the woods when they are heard, of red nations falling when they are remembered. This is the sound we hear when fist meets flesh, when bullets pop against chests, when memories rattle hollow in stomachs. And we turn this sound over and over again until it becomes fertile ground from which we will build new nations upon the ashes of our ancestors, until it becomes the rattle of a new revolution, these fingers drumming on keys. Miigwech. So now we'll look towards questions you may have asked us. I'm trying to see, do we have questions? So here's one. So here's a question for Gwen. Gwen, in one of your pieces, you said the line, they knew themselves from stories. In what stories have you felt that you knew yourself? And how have those stories strengthened your understanding of yourself and of others?
Wow, that's like this big of a question.
You can do it.
You know, I think it's those stories. Thank you, Connor, for that question. I think it's those stories that are almost cell deep, and I don't know whether they come from reenacting that same process that my grandmother did as a child, sitting under the kitchen table, listening to the old people talk, as she would say, and then being that child in the kitchen, under the table, listening to them talk, or under the quilting frame, listening to the women as they talked, my grandmother's sisters. And but those stories are also in the land. And I think the stories in the land have spoken most to me in the last 30 years. It's a connection that I don't know how to explain, that are helping me to know my place in this world. I'm still learning what that means.
Wonderful. Anyone else want to maybe grab that same question and expand on it? Looks like we might have another one. So same, okay, so maybe we could ask everyone to talk about their favorite poem in the anthology, or name one of the poems that you think is like one that resonates with you. You know, Joy Harjo talks about our poetry ancestors and how, you know, we have our literal ancestors, and then we have, you know, we have ancestors in poetry, we have ancestors in song and story. And so it would, maybe we could all talk about one of the poems in here that kind of resonates for you or that you'd like to share. Or we could invite our wonderful Gordon Henry in to read one as well. I see Gwen's nodding her head.
To the Gordon Henry suggestion.
Gordon, do you feel like you could read a poem?
Yeah, if you give me a second to find my book, yeah. I think it's over here.
Well, I'll just like talk for a moment. I'm not sure why. I don't know if I hope my voice is okay, but I don't seem to appear on your little screen. I was a tree, I noticed when I was reading. I'm not sure why that is. It's probably something with Zoom. Zoom is always mysterious.
We can see you though, so you're good.
Okay, awesome.
I'm looking through my book.
Well, let me just say something else about the anthology that I wanted to say anyway, is that, you know, thinking about this gathering of poems, and some of them are touching on, you know, harsh truths that need to be recognized, and they are looking at loss, and they're looking at it squarely, you know, and I at the same time, I feel like there is this this hope, this like underbeat of hope that runs through the poems, because I wanted to quote Corinne Wood, who says, "This is to say we continued," right? And that's it. We're still here. We're still making poems. We're still carrying the songs and the stories of the earth, like you said, Gwen, of our ancestors. We're still carrying that into our art and into our living. And I think right now is another time when the light of the world is subdued, and we really need to have those songs and those poems and those stories and to carry that with us. So I think it's a moment for us. Gordon, are you ready?
I do have a poem I could read.
Excellent.
A couple of very short ones. As I say that, I also want to acknowledge a couple of people who are attending. Jane Hafen and Patrice Hollera, these Nels clan sisters, clan mothers you mentioned before. They've been an inspiration to many of us in this group, as have the poets here. I'm very grateful to have heard you all read tonight. Your work is beautiful, and I appreciate you taking the time to do this. It's really inspiring to bring you all together again and to be part of this. So I'm going to read a couple from the anthology. It's often interesting in anthology to see what poems other people want you to include, whereas you might have a different view of what you might include. It's kind of a subjectification of mine to might be different, but and you will never forgive me for using that word, will you, Kim? But I've already forgotten that word almost. But anyway, I'll read this poem called "November Becomes the Sky with Suppers for the Dead." I would never have thought of including this poem. I think Joy had her graduate class review poetry and make recommendations, and one of the grad students in that class recommended this poem. So it's, again, November Becomes the Sky with Suppers for the Dead. I'm standing outside in Minnesota, ghost wind recalling names in winter mist. The road smells of dogs 2 days dead. white photographers talk in the house of mainstream media. I can't articulate the agony of Eagle Singer's children to them. We celebrate the old man while another generation shoots crushed and heated prescriptions, sells baskets, machinery, the fixtures yet to be installed in the house yet to be heated by the tribal government, for another night stolen by the stupors and the wondrous pleasure of forget everything medicines. Back inside, Uncle Two Dogs rolls me a smoke out of organic American spirit. I look to a last cup of coffee. The way home fills with snow, our tracks, human and machine. And I'll read another that people seem to like to anthologize. So I'm thinking maybe I've written 2 or 3 good poems because people keep anthologizing the same poems all over again. This is one called When Names Escaped Us. The boy painted himself white and ran into the darkness. We let the words, he may be dead, bury him, bury him. We took his clothes to the rummage sale in the basement of the mission. We put his photographs and drawings in a bird cage and covered it with a star quilt. For 4 nights, voices carried clear to the river. After winter, so many storms moved in. Strangers came among us. They danced. They shoveled in the shadows of trees. Then somehow we all felt, all of us were of this one boy. Thanks for letting me read tonight. I wasn't planning on that, but it's an honor to read with you all. Kim?
It looks like there's one more question that came in.
Yeah.
Yeah, so someone asked, is there a place recommended for unpublished poets to submit work? So there are always calls for publications, and some of us here in this room tonight are part of a new organization called INAPO, Indigenous Nations Poets, and part of our mission is to mentor younger poets, and we're working on a website that will have, advertise these places for you. But in the meantime, does someone want to throw a particular idea out? If this is like a single poem, we can, suggest some journals, but if it's a collection, that might be another thought. So any of you want to make a recommendation for this person, Nina?
Well, I could throw something in there. Kim, you and I both know at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, we have the Cream City Review, and they often are looking for poetry. So I'll throw that out there, but it's obviously, I'm quite biased. I mean, I think though, it's always a good thing for, I would say 2 things. One is find all the calls for poetry and the ones that speak to you and have topics and subjects that really captivate you, send something in. And whether or not they get taken, find those poems a home. A lot of times poems will find a home eventually. And I think that the poets, at least the poets that I see and know here, have done a lot of writing into the moment and into their communities, and for reasons that may not seem obvious when they start writing, but then those poems are used and take a life, and they just really, they have a little story of their own. So sometimes you might be writing for, your daughter's 5th grade classroom, and then that's something that becomes part of an anthology later. Sometimes you write for a publication that's much broader, but just write all the time and give the poems to everyone that will take them. That would be my advice. I don't know what others have to say.
Yeah.
I think it's a part of the poet's task and craft to find places that will be interested in your work, because it's kind of hard to say, well, I don't know what you're writing, so I don't know how to advise you, because the poetry journals are very centered, and it's good to read them to find out who is writing and what this journal is about. So I always recommend that people make it part of the learning process to find places where you feel like your work is in conversation with other poets. It's a process all unto itself, and there are many hundreds of journals to look at, and your library carries a lot of them. So it's part of our wonderful journey. It's a journey to find the community where your work will fit. So I tell my students, this is your particular task, is to find those places that speak to you. So I would say, go out and look for those, and you'll be surprised. You can see yourself in so many places, and that's what I would hone into. Yeah.
That's excellent advice. So I want to add to that, to just say that, if you want to just go out and see what kind of work people are asking for, you can go to a publication like Poets and Writers, and they have always saying what, here's some calls for submission, right? And then there's a little description. And then, as Leanne says, it'll, that whoever has put out that call, go and look at that journal. Do you fit in it? Is that the kind of work that you're writing? And another place that you can make use of is Submittable. So if you sign up with Submittable, you can also use it to look for calls for what people are looking for, right? And then honestly, I am not a big social media person, and I just recently have started to do Facebook more, but when I started to do Facebook, I realized people share all the time calls on Facebook. So if you were to connect up with some of the Native, what do you even call those subgroups, those groups, people will share those there as well.
I have a poem, if that's okay, I'd like to read. And I hope it's not disrespectful. It's kind of a long poem, so I'll just read like half of it. But it's by Adrian Lewis, who's a Lovelock Paiute poet. And I got to know him when I was at Cornell. We invited him out, the Indigenous Graduate Student Association. And it was kind of a really beautiful story how it happened. How I kind of got to know him and how we invited him out. One of the students, he was a PhD student there. He was White Mountain Apache and I think Kafiaki, and he had this. I put it out to the Indigenous Graduate Student Association. I said, what Native poet do we want to invite to do a reading for Native American Heritage Month? And he was the only one who had said anything. And so I said, okay. And he had said Adrian Lewis, and shared this wonderful story about how, he had dropped out of high school. And, well, that's not the wonderful part, but he dropped out of high school, and he had gotten into drugs and drinking, and he had gotten so low that, he was contemplating suicide, and he staggered into a library one evening to warm up, and found this literary journal with this poem by Adrian Lewis. This is The Time of Grasshoppers, and all that I see is dying. And he opened it up and he found it, and he said he read it over and over and over. He copied it, and he took it out, and he just it hit him so poignantly that, he was grieving for his wife, Colleen, and he felt it. And anyway, it essentially saved his life. This young man who was, then a PhD student at Cornell, and had gone on to get married and have kids and, succeed in these ways. So this is the time of grasshoppers, and all that I see is dying. Colleen, this is the time of grasshoppers, and all that I see is dying, except my virulent love for you. The Cowturd Star Times, which usually has a typo in every damn column, says the grasshoppers this year are as big as Buicks, and that's not bad. But then we get 2 8-point pages of who had dinner with whom at the bowling alley cafe and who went shopping at Target in Rapid City, and thus the High Church of Adrian the Obscure is sacked. Even my old Dylan tapes are fading, becoming near comic antiques. The grasshoppers are destroying our yard, and they're as big as my middle finger saluting God. The grass is yellow. The trees look like Agent Orange has hit, but it's only the jaw work of those drab-armored insects who dance in profusion and pure destruction. Sweet woman, dear love of my life, when you're not angry and sputtering at everything and everyone, you become so childlike, so pure. Your voice seems to have grown higher recently, almost a little girl pitch. Today, like most days, I have you home for your 2-hour reprieve from the nursing home prison. We're sitting at the picnic table in the backyard, staring at the defoliation of lilacs, brain matter, and honeysuckle. You're eating a Hershey bar, and a crystal glob of snot is hanging from your nose. I reach over, pinch it off, and wipe it on my jeans. You thrust the last bite of chocolate into my mouth as a demented grasshopper jumps onto your ear. You scream, I howl, with laughter until you do too. Happiness comes with a price. This is the time of grasshoppers, and all that I see is dying except for my swarming love for you.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Tacey.
Thanks, Casey. That was awesome. That was great. Great poem.
What do you think, Gordon?
There's one more question. Did you get to it or not? Wonderful reading. I wonder if panelists might reflect on their place in the anthology, and then we could close up after that if you want to. If you want to talk about that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It says, I wonder if panelists might each reflect a bit on their place in the anthology and how they contextualize their own work in terms of the anthology as a whole. I'd love to hear more about the relationship between these particular poets and the astonishing scope of the anthology.
I didn't write that question.
Well, let me, I'll give people time to think and say just a couple things about what was unusual about this, the making of this anthology, is that Joy and Leanne and Jennifer invited a community of Indigenous poets to work together, to put together the content, to talk about, what this anthology should look like. And we met virtually over a period of a couple of years. We met in person at AWP, and we actually met for several full days in Santa Fe, where we laughed and ate and did some work too. But it was a community building experience. And I felt like that I got to know other poets much better. I got to know the field of Indigenous poetry more than I had known it prior, and that the anthology includes not just poets I was already aware of, but younger poets, work that I didn't know was out there. So I think even though we're in the field, it was like really, really wonderful to have that expanded for us, to just see the amount of work. And then also just to have all of these voices kind of come into a unit where it's like sound is like interacting. These poems are interacting. And so what comes out of this, even though it's immense, what comes out of this is maybe another whole poem, right? It's like something like that. So I could say I was also, Gordon and I, and Bobby Hill, Roberta Hill were the editors for the Northeast Midwest section. And so we worked together on that. And then I wrote the introduction for that section. But that, that kind of thing of just like having conversations about poetry was what was wonderful about this too. Mm-hmm. So now I'll let my fellow panelists speak.
What I was going to say is when we put the book together, it was always with an eye to geography. and land. The book is organized by region. And so you all represented the plains, the section with Ojibwe and Dakota. Then if you look at the southeast section, so it was actually, to answer your question, it was really easy to put together because we were regionally in conversation with each other. So Southeastern poets were together and we had our place in the book. And if you think about the way in which we dance in the Southeast and go around counterclockwise, that's the way in which we thought about the regions in collaboration with each other. So they're not randomly placed, they're very specific. So, and each region then would choose their own poems. And then we put them together. And I think, like Kim was saying, that the work itself, what happened, this text has its own spirit. And it came together through these regions and the work that we did collaboratively. It was I think it was spirit work, actually. It felt that way in the process and in the making. The book had ideas, it wanted a certain thing, and so we just did it. And it felt really good. It feels really good. It's a labor of pure joy and spirit. So thanks for your question.
That's a good question. Yeah. I wanted to just acknowledge a couple of people too, if nobody else is going to take on that big question. Ellie Mitchell and Christy Poitras, both here at MSU. Ellie's offered to help me tonight co-host, and I appreciate that. She's a Saginaw Chippewa member and Indigenous Language Coordinator here at MSU, and Christy's Director of the NEI. So I was a little nervous about the event, and I just asked them to help out. Anyone else want to take that on before, or should we close up tonight? Well, thanks so much for your work, everyone. I do appreciate all you've done for Native poetry, and Joyce says thanks to you also in the chat. Keep up the good work. We're going to have another event tomorrow at 2 with 4 more Native poets from the Anthology, and these are being recorded as well, and will be available on the MSU English Department YouTube channel site. So if you want to look at this later or use some of the work in your classrooms, you can do that as well. All right, y'all. Take care of yourselves. Miigwech for everything. And I look forward to reading more of your work.